From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello. Welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer, Paul, Mission Control Decant. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. It is Thursday if you're listening to this show the day it comes out, which means it is time for listener mail. And Matt, Noel, what better way to kick it off, I think, than to introduce everyone to the latest iteration of the stuff they don't want you to know drinking game. If you are on Here's Where It Gets Crazy, our Facebook group page, you'll be well aware that every few years or so, someone will come up with a stuff they don't want you to know drinking game. It's usually based on our own idiosyncrasies in speech, in tone, and things we like to talk about. This drinking game, I think I posted it last time we were recording. It's going to put some people in the hospital. Okay. Like we say a lot of these things pretty often. So everybody be safe, but I don't know about you all. Did you guys see that post?
Can we go through it? You mentioned it when we were getting off from recording the other day. I think, what is mine? Veiled, not so veiled weed reference? Isn't that mine?
That's one of them. Yeah.
What happens if you actually hear me hitting the bong in the background? Is that extra points?
I think that counts as
how do drinking games
as
work?
Well.
You just drink, right? Every time you hear the thing?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So like in a dangerous X-Files drinking game that I learned about the hard way is to take a drink every time someone unnecessarily says Mulder's name. And they say it a lot, you realize, when you've got booze on the line. But we're introducing that drinking game to first thank everybody. I don't know about you all, but it always makes my day when one of our fellow conspiracy realists takes some time out of their own schedule to make these cool memes for us or to make these cool drinking games. I am hesitant a little bit today, guys, because I'm looking at the list and I don't want to be responsible for anyone going to the ER for an alcohol poisoning situation. So I'm going to try to avoid some of my typical figures of speech here, but let us know if you guys have a stuff they don't want you to know drinking game of your own, and we'll share it.
Are you not going to say what they are?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's quite a list. Let's run through it quickly. The idea is, quote, "I'm sure I'm not the first, but here's my proposal for stuff they don't want you to know drinking game. This game can be played alone, but is much better with friends. Okay, get a bottle of the hard liquor of your choice and a shot glass. Every time you hear the following, you down a shot. Simple." So this list calls out some stuff in good fun, I would argue. So we're going to round robin, and we'll just start reading some of these things, the ones that apply to the guilty parties. So Ben says, Noel, Matt is away on adventures. You have to take a shot.
Nice. I do say that every once in a while, too. So you don't have to take a shot if I say it. Matt laughs nervously.
You kind of just did that, actually.
I know.
Leading into saying that. Any of the hosts, I guess this applies to all of us, start speaking in a funny accent. Bonus shots if other host joins in.
Ben uses the word unclean to describe something genuinely or immoral. It's true. I make no apologies for that. That is the perfect word to describe some of the darker things that we've encountered in the show.
Noel sounds confused.
Maybe Matt mentions a conspiracy rabbit hole he fell down. Oh boy, I do that a lot.
The hosts discuss a bar or restaurant they have been to or intend to go to, and that probably is a shout out to our favorite local bar, the local.
In a burst of creativity, as you would say. No shade. I mean, it is the local. There can be no other. Let's see. The hosts mention a conversation they had on a night out together at likely said local watering hole. Mm-hmm.
Or, and this one follows very closely with that one, the hosts particularly Matt, mention a conversation they had, but they can't remember if it was a night out or if it was on the air. I've done that in like 6 of the last episodes. Wow.
No, this is good. Noel sheepishly admits he doesn't take his cybersecurity seriously. The thing about doing these shows, we do a lot of them, and I'm sure we've told the same story a million times. I would hate, perish the thought of hearing like a supercut of like a same story scenario from any of us. It would probably make us all just slink away in shame, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's par for the course, man. That's just it's going to happen. Yeah, I probably should take my cybersecurity. I will say this. I got a notification today that there was an attempt at logging into my Amazon account that I didn't recognize, and I went right in and changed the password. So
hey,
take
good
that.
job, and sorry about that. I just had the wrong login.
No, I really appreciate you keeping me on my toes, but
awesome. if you get some shipments of Kevlar, just text me. We'll take care of it. I'll Venmo you.
Dude, that sounds a lot like one of the fun activities I might mention that I did with my son. Changing passwords.
Ooh, nice.
Everybody loves a good password changing sesh. Noah mentions doing fun activities with his daughter. Yeah, I do that. Because we hang. She's cool.
Yeah, she is super cool. You can also hear Eden on Ephemeral, and you can hear her on Ridiculous History. So do check it out. And Eden, if you're listening, thanks for classing up the show. As always, the next one, Ben uses the adverb cartoonishly. Yes, again, no apologies. It applies correctly to so many situations.
Sure does. Cartoonishly so.
Mm-hmm. Just so.
No, Noah makes unsubtle weed reference. Initially, I read that as unusable weed reference. There's no such thing. Yeah, I don't think I'm trying to be subtle. I think we've crossed a line. We've crossed a line into the brave new world of the future, whether it be, the nature of our parent company or with the nature of podcasting in general, where I'm not trying to be subtle about anything in that department. So there you go.
Very nice. Sounds like something I may have learned from my wife, which is apparently something I mention all the time.
And the very last one, take a shot if any of the hosts mention Atlanta traffic. We do want to say, we do want to say if you were listening, you want to play this game, you can see the full rules on here's where it gets crazy, but the stuff we mentioned when actually reading the list shouldn't count. And honestly, you may want to alternate some of those shots with sips of water.
Yes, please. Please do.
If our proclivities are correct. But that is just an example of the awesome stuff we have going on in the conspiracy realist family. And as I've pointed out in the past, often, we're all on the same page about it. You, specifically you, are the most important part of this show. It can't happen without you, which is why we are always so excited for our weekly listener mail segment. We have sifted through emails. We've listened to correspondences over the phone, in some cases called people back. That's right. The Abyss will return your call. And today, we're looking at some ongoing news in the land of our northern neighbors. We're looking at some more dangers of the metaverse. And where better to start than a very strange story, Matt, that came to us via voicemail. I want to say we pronounce this Pisgah National Forest. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, the Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina. For this first message, we're traveling to Burnsville, North Carolina, with a message from our friend Smitty.
Hey, I'm going to call myself Smitty. I'm from a very small town in North Carolina. And my grandmother was a head cook for a corporate retreat called the Cane River Fishing Club in North Carolina. Anyway, I was with her there for a long time. I was raised by my grandparents. And most days, you'd see people. There were diplomats, presidents, George W. and I believe Jimmy Carter. She cooked for them. And it's a very secretive place up there where deals get done. But yeah, it's all the way up. It's just a fly fishing retreat But I got to know the game warden that worked up there. He worked with my grandmother for a long time. And he told me a story. And the story was he was going through the wilderness one day, checking on whatever he does. I don't know what a game warden really does up there. But he came across a guy in a lab coat. And I said, a lab coat? And he's like, yeah, a lab coat. And he didn't speak English. And he was lost in the woods. And then all of a sudden, he said, take me here, take me there. And there is a part of the wilderness up there. It's a Matt's expanse of wilderness that's no one's been to. And apparently he was, he dropped him off at a base inside the Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina. And I was only 15 when he told me this. But from the people I've seen there and the people that had come in and out that I'd talked to, I got autographs and different things, ate dinner with them, even though I was in the kitchen, I got to eat, what my grandmother was cooking. But there's something out there in the Pisgah National Forest that I think you should look into, because it's vast wilderness.
And the message cuts off there. Smitty called back several times and finished the story, but
so he
I
wasn't
gave him
mauled
a call
by
back.
a forest witch, at least.
No.
Okay.
He was safely calling us from the side of the road, as I confirmed after I called him back. But I'll just say at the end of that, he just let us know there's something. He believes there's some kind of government or quasi-government group that operates out of the Pisgah National Forest, and it has something to do with that person that was found by the game warden that he knew in the area.
Can we say first two things really quick, Smitty? Thank you for calling. Also, we heard off air another one of your messages, and you had the coolest sign off ever. I hope you always conclude phone calls by saying Smitty out.
Maybe we can edit this one to where the last thing that we hear is Smitty out.
Yes.
Maybe we can find a way to do this.
The world is ours. So there is something cool. And I don't get to say this every time when we have someone call in with a regional mystery, but here we go. Smitty, you are correct, sir. Pisgah National Forest is home to a little something called the Pisgah Astronomical Research Institute.
Oh, snap.
Yeah. This reminds me of the National Radio Quiet Zone, or Zone of Silence. That's a little further north. The Astronomical Research Institute is in the National Forest that you mentioned in Balsam Grove, North Carolina. That's a lot of, it's a agglomeration of radio telescopes and optical telescopes. And it's been around for a while. NASA established something earlier there called the Rosman Satellite Tracking Station in 1962. So although it sounds really weird to see someone dressed in a lab coat in the middle of the woods, they were probably associated with that. That's what I'm guessing. What do you think?
I'm just sad that there are no forest witches involved in this story. I don't know why my mind immediately goes to that, but lab coats are scary too, I suppose.
Well, here, I think you may be on the right track. In our document that we share for these episodes, you guys, I posted a specific road in Burnsville, North Carolina, that Smitty shared with me. And it's a Google Maps link. And this road is where that fishing club is, the Cane River Fishing Club. And it looks like if you were to drive from where that is to where the Pisgah Astronomical Research Institute is located, you'd be driving for about 2 hours, maybe 2 3/4 hours. So I have a feeling maybe it's a different thing. But I don't know where that game warden operates or operated at the time. Just putting that out there. I think it might be something else.
Lab coat wearing forest witches still in play. Still in play, potentially.
Well,
always in play.
This is just the information I have from Smitty. I wanted to give you guys just a little more background because I think it's so fascinating. As Smitty says in that message, he grew up there at this place that's titled the Cane River Fishing Club, or at least that's how he recalls it. His grandmother was a chef or the chef there. It's very much a private getaway, like a corporate getaway kind of thing that was, according to Smitty, run and owned by the Hanes Underwear Corporation. So Hanes, we all know Hanes. I think that was the Michael Jordan one. Is that right? Maybe not. I can't remember. But Smitty had only nice things to say about the company. It's just what he was saying is that, they're a big corporation. They make large donations to political groups, right? When there are elections and everything. And that would make sense why they would have people like Jimmy Carter and George W. Bush out to this fishing club. Although, if you search online for it, you will find very little information, very little records of a thing titled the, quote, Cane River Fishing Club. I found one mention of it as I was searching around. It is found at Appalachian.org in a small piece called Cane River Headwaters that was written in May 2021. And there's just a mention of the, quote, Cane River Fishing Club. And it's talking about conservation of the Cane River itself and efforts to, to make sure this area remains safe and the waters remain safe for both the wildlife, the fish that are in there that are so sought after, as well as the humans that live near there. Guys, I just have to say I was excited to share this with y'all because it felt like one of those weird things that happens when you're younger that you recall and you try and share. And you may not get all the facts right or something like that, but it's got enough intrigue that it makes me want to search deeper into it.
Agreed, 100%. And I think a lot of people have something like that stays with you, and often as time goes on, humans begin to crystallize those memories and you start thinking almost like a tableau, like a still photo. And maybe a certain smell unlocks the memory for you. That's one thing I think might be of interest to you, Smitty. For anybody else trying to recover more information about an early memory, if you start trying to focus on the sensory input that you associate with that time and with that moment, you're probably going to unlock more details than you might have initially. So what were the smells in the kitchen, in your grandmother's kitchen? What were the textures you were touching? Things like that. Now, obviously, the idea of memory regression it's not solid science. It's easily manipulated through a number of ways, but you could take a page from Proust and have your own sort of remembrance of things past. With that in mind, though, Matt, it is totally conceivable for there to be numerous hidden government installations in these federally owned lands, or in parklands, rather.
Yeah, it's very possible. Or maybe it's just something different that the game warden thought was weird when he told that story to Smitty.
Did you guys watch the Watchmen reboot on HBO? I know you did, Ben.
Mm-hmm. I saw some of it. Yes. Okay. Yeah. I don't remember a ton of the details.
There's a character in it called the Game Warden. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but if you want to find out what a really weird psychedelic Game Warden does, watch the Watchmen reboot. I think a real one is just kind of in their purview to oversee, fish and game and things like that, and make sure people's. It's like the sheriff of the woods, right?
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, man.
They're responsible for enforcing, codes and hunting licenses.
There are rules.
Fishing licenses.
There are rules with hunting seasons.
The rules of the woods, man. They don't mess around.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I wasn't going to bring this up, and I'll just quickly mention it to you guys. Smitty also let us know a story about another place where he grew up, called the New Ray Inn. Now it's spelled Nuwrayin. It's the New Ray Inn.
Does it have umlaut over the U like in nu metal?
I don't think so.
Pretty hardcore.
It was established in 1833. I want to say. I believe that's what it says on the sign there out front. Really interesting stuff. Just a very old inn that has a weird past that Smitty swears, and many of the people who worked there swear that it is haunted, especially on the third floor.
I'm always up for that. Those kind of adventures, Matt. As a matter of fact, when you mentioned this, I was just doing a quick cursory search, and it looks like the New Ray Inn is unfortunately closed for renovations at this time, which in my mind means they're having a full-scale exorcism. They're cleansing the house. That's what's happening.
Yeah, maybe that's happening. It is a very old building. It's been renovated several times, so. Anyway, that's the whole thing. That's the story of Smitty. Thank you so much for calling, sir. And we will take a quick break right here. We'll be back with more messages from you.
And we're back. And we recently did an episode on the Metaverse, the future of the internet, Web 3.0, all that good stuff. And, you know, some of the potential problems that could arise around a dystopian world where no one wants to go outside anymore, and they just sit and atrophy in their lazy boys, you know, while they're fed medications and vitamins and supplements through some sort of drip feed, all the while, you know, hanging out in a virtual world, living their best life. Or are they? It's debatable. But there are some very interesting and serious slippery slope type situations involving the metaverse that we didn't really cover. There's a really great article that dives into some of these that was sent to us by listener Kyle. He writes, "Hello, stdwytk team. I am a student at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and recently saw this article and listened to your most recent podcast, the one on the metaverse. It talks about the metaverse in regards to terrorism, counterterrorism, and violent extremism. I thought that you guys would find it interesting. Great podcast. Keep it up." Kyle. Yeah, he's right. And there are parts of this article on The Conversation, which is an academic journal. Well, it's sort of like I don't know. It sort of looks more like a website like Vice or something like that, but it does appear to be largely populated by articles written by scholars, folks that are, you know, receiving grant money, think tanks, and the like. So this particular article is actually written by 3 different people. Sam Hunter is professor of psychology at the University of Nebraska. Austin C. Doctor, which is a great last name, who is an assistant professor of political science, again, at University of Nebraska. And Joel S. Elson, who is assistant professor of IT innovation at the University of Nebraska. And their powers combined, they point out some really troubling implications for ways that the metaverse could be exploited by terrorism. One of the most obvious ways, I think it's the same that applies to social media, it's not particularly novel, is just, you know, recruitment. They make the point that, you know, today someone who might be interested in hearing what the Oath Keepers are up to might read an article by their founder, Stuart Rhodes, or possibly, you know, watch a YouTube video of him talking. But the metaverse, of course, takes it to the next level, and it could, you know, actually have a very high quality artificial intelligence stand-in for Rhodes. People would be able to essentially interact with him, you know, or like a version of him, and, you know, obviously assemble to watch this person speak, and it would be much more potentially direct recruitment and the ability to kind of really kind of stir people up and with, you know, who share this kind of ideology in a much more palpable way than just, you know, spreading literature. And you could reach a lot more people that way. Obviously, you can still do that with live streams and stuff. But, you know, I actually heard an interview with Mark Zuckerberg on some podcast. I can't remember the name, but it's obviously pretty well-regarded tech podcast because Zuckerberg, I don't think he does a whole lot of podcasts. But he was talking about how, you know, they're developing technology essentially that, you know, ideally in the future would make these AI avatars indistinguishable from the real thing. You know, from a real person, and they can obviously be customized, but like talking about down to like the fibers, you know, hair and skin and pores and things like that. So, you know, the future of this stuff would potentially have the ability to reach a lot of people in a very direct way. Here is the one that I thought was the most interesting. I'd love to chat about this particular one with you guys. Coordination. Think about the augmented reality, the way, you know, even now you can pop on your Oculus Rift and go to an address. You can type in an address and Google Earth or, you know, Google Street View will take you there. And you can it's not very high-fi. It's a little, the images are not like super duper high resolution. And you can't exactly walk around in your old neighborhood and interact with stuff, but you can check it out. And chances are, there might be a new paint job on a porch here and there, but chances are the permanent structures are going to be largely the same. Think about how that could be used for like plotting an attack or some sort of heist or say an insurrection type event, gaining access to places that maybe you wouldn't be able to do recon in IRL, but you could bounce around in a simulated version of it in the metaverse. I thought it's so simple, but it's really kind of game changing. What do you guys think about that?
It's an interesting concept because we know that high-level thinkers and strategists within actual militaries use very similar modeling. Not necessarily in a virtual world like that, but in a model, at least that's laid out. Think about I go back to this example all the time, but if you think about at the CIA museum, that model that they had of the compound where Osama bin Laden was allegedly captured, how they built an actual model of that from satellite imagery, and then they game planned exits, entries, plan A, plan B, plan C, and all of that, to where if something goes wrong, we can change our actions and compensate for a problem. If you've got a fully realized virtual environment of a place that you wish to attack for any reason, for any ideological motivation, that could certainly be dangerous. My only counter argument to it is that you can pull off much of the same thing with standard satellite imagery that's available in other places, and it may be more effective than the virtual version. Maybe. Just because of the limits on the technology and what you can actually physically do.
I think we're largely talking about like a next gen version of this stuff. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, because even, I've played with your Oculus Rift before, Matt, and it does a good job of like keeping an eye on the space that you're occupying and keeping you within certain boundaries. But like, you're sort of limited. You can't just go running around doing drills. You know what I mean?
To be fair, the Oculus that I have is, it's the consumer version. There are many other ways into, a 3D environment like that are not the Facebook Meta Oculus, that are more powerful, that, are maybe connected through wires rather than the wireless system there, that have higher processing power, that are further advanced, I would say, than what you and I have experienced.
Absolutely. I would say there's another aspect here, which I believe is mentioned in the article that you sent, Kyle, which is the idea of terrorism in a virtual sphere, just like classified as attacks. We used to joke about Zoom bombing, but the article in the conversation references a very plausible scenario in which a 9/11 memorial is taken over, or is disrupted by bad faith actors. But it also reminds, like, we know people are going to do this. This is on the way. It's just a different expression of the same inclinations, tactics, and strategies. Like, I love hearing those stories of someone doing a prank in some virtual or public event. Like, there's so many stories of a disgruntled employee, like the guy who's in charge of the roadside warning signs, just changing stuff on their last day. When we're talking about terrorism in this way, I think we do see a lot of precedents. Google Earth is a tremendous tool for vicarious exploration and for surveillance. And that's why so many things on Google Earth get blurred out for security purposes. Is this going to happen? Yes, absolutely. And it's not going to happen because it's a crazy, unprecedented thing. It's going to happen because it already has happened. These kinds of strategies predate social media. They predate the printing press. This is just another tool for people to use to enforce their ideology. But there's another point here, Noel. Now, it's really interesting to me in terms of kind of the soft science of recruitment and radicalization. Imagine you're a kid, you've grown up native to the metaverse or whatever it ends up being called, And you live in a world where it is challenging for people to figure out if they're talking to a real person or if they're talking to like a hologram, an AI generated deepfake. You meet a dead terrorist leader, right? Or you're a member of a neo-Nazi group online and they have created a Hitler of some sort. And you can be in this virtual space and you can speak to Hitler. That would be a very powerful tool for radicalization. And I think that's more dangerous.
Right. That's like a step beyond the Oath Keepers example that I mentioned. You're absolutely right. You could, Tupac hologram at Coachella, that business. Only, in the metaverse, there's going to be pockets. There's going to be pockets of this kind of extremism. By its very nature, you can't outlaw it. I mean, you can outlaw hate speech to a degree, but it's also really, it's going to be, if it is going to be an open and free internet, then this stuff is going to exist. And unless you can prove that they're doing recruitment or whatever, which is going to be really hard to do, just like it is right now on the internet, as it exists today. So, and it's just one of many potentially problematic scenarios that could crop up in this new online world. So, something to keep an eye on for sure.
Did you guys know that you can right now search through your browser and find the contact information of the nearest Ku Klux Klan group in your state? If you live in the United States,
the Ku Klux Klan is not illegal,
but it's just all there. It's just on the internet, and it's just hanging out. And you can find it. You don't have to do any kind of creative searching. You don't have to do anything with your browser or your network. You can just access it, and you've got the information. It's strange to me that type of radicalization is just so out in the open. But again, it is part of, as you're stating there, the open internet. And we've decided as a society that that's worth it. So it's interesting that we're having these conversations just to see like where those lines will be drawn. How strong will those lines be, and who's going to decide what they are?
I'd like to also take a moment to shout out first, everything you guys are saying, I completely agree with. These are real dilemmas. These are tall milkshakes. These are Gordian knots. There's not really a way now to protect people from damaging crazy things without also eroding their freedoms, which are very, very important, and they're hard won, But in a moment of levity, I want to shout out the Mitchell and Webb look. If you guys like sketch comedy, fellow conspiracy realists, they're the same dudes who made Peep Show. I cannot deal with the social cringe of Peep Show, but it is a great show. Mitchell and Webb look. All you have to do is go to your browser of choice and type in Mitchell and Webb look Ku Klux Klan. They have a wonderful little reimagining of how it got invented, and it's brilliant writing. But it's also addressing a very important issue. Extremism is on the rise, not just in the U.S. but across the world, and not just in the quote unquote global West. These groups are real. They do exist, and in some cases, they are being aided and embedded by people in power. And that's where we get to these scary parts of an equation. And I completely agree with Kyle, with your point. Like, is the metaverse going to help people become their better selves? Or is it just going to add more kerosene to the burning bonfire of crappy things people do to each other? Unfortunately, I think it's trending toward the latter. But we'll have to see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we should be hopeful. What do you guys think? Hopeful? Cynicism? Right.
Cautiously hopeless. How about that?
Yeah.
Optimistically nihilistic. Yeah.
Quick disclaimer, I only know about the KKK thing because I learned about it today as I was fact-checking episode 7 of the MLK tapes, which you can listen to right now. Plug. Sorry.
Always be closing. Yeah.
Do that thing.
Always be closing, Matt.
Always. You can have coffee.
So now this leads us to ask the next question. We got a lot of response about our Metaverse episode, and the same day we released it, by the way, I even added this in the meta, the same day we released it, Facebook stock tanked, like in the worst dip in the company's history. So not everybody's on board. If you're against the metaverse, you should know that other people agree with you. But if you think it's all just fear mongering and alarmism, you know, everyone's entitled to your opinion, but I would ask you to read some of the papers that are out, some of the excellent research that Noel you've referenced earlier. These problems are real. People aren't making them up. The potential danger here is enormous, and it's on the horizon because something like the metaverse is inevitable. It's already happening.
Yep. It's one of those genies that you can't shove back in the bottle, or badgers in bags, or what have you. But definitely, yeah, you should probably make another drinking game edition where when Noel says, definitely something to keep an eye on. That's my.
I thought it was
You
going to be
can't
when
make your own drinking games. That's like giving yourself your own nickname.
Well, okay. You know, I'm a rule breaker too, Ben. I play by I follow no rules of man, only the rules of God. So on that note, we're going to take a quick break and be back with more messages from you.
And we have returned. We're going to go to Canada here for a inside look at a continuing situation. It's one a lot of our fellow listeners have written to us about. It's also, I'll introduce you to a Twitter conversation in a moment as well, guys. But here we go. We are going to hear from our fellow conspiracy realist, Canadian Trooper.
Hey guys, I left a message earlier about the Freedom Convoy. It obviously wasn't very good. I was a little nervous, so I've written a little script, so I thought I'd give it a second whirl. So here goes. Hey guys, Canadian Trooper here, just calling to say that I love the show and see if you guys are interested in covering the Freedom Convoy up here in Canada. If you don't know, it's a huge protest against vaccine mandates for truckers. The convoy part comes in as thousands and thousands of truckers move together from BC across the country to Ottawa, flying flags and huge signs protesting mandates. Thousands more people joined up along the way, and they all went to camp in Parliament Hill in the nation's capital. Now, this is where things get a little interesting. From day one, the government and media have been saying that this is a tiny majority of the Canadian public and just a fringe group. But looking at the numbers shows it's just not. I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but there's so much info about how the media is saying that the protesters are being aggressive and violent, stealing from homeless people, etc., etc. I mean, as with any protest, there are a few bad apples in it, but not nearly to the extent that it's being portrayed as. One last point I want to hit is that all along the Prime Minister has been saying that it's such a small group and that there's nothing to worry about. But the second that they get close to Ottawa, he conveniently has to isolate due to contact with a positive case of COVID. There's so much more here, guys, but I'll leave that talking up to you. You are more than welcome to use my voice in there. Thanks, boys.
And that is Canadian Trooper.
Oh, can I just say, we just got a thanks, boys. That's like a very Canadian, like Trailer Park Boys kind of thing, right? That's my only, or like Letterkenny. Yes, I love that. We're the boys. We're like honorary Canadians.
You know what? I would love that. I would love to be an honorary citizen of most countries. But yes, Canadian Trooper, we're keeping the entirety of your message here. I'm going to use you as an example for the class. And I think this is something you can appreciate too as well, Matt. Canadian Trooper, at the very beginning of your message, you said, I didn't feel too comfortable, so I wrote some stuff down. I wrote a script. If you want to do that, then please feel free to do so. It's a great way to organize thoughts, and it'll also, at least for most people's experience, it'll also introduce some new ideas in your process when you're writing. Well, just for fun, I wanted to keep the part of the call where you say, "Oh, how do I turn this off?" Because that one made my day. But he's raising some great points here, guys, because we're seeing a narrative war taking place regarding this convoy, which is being referred to as the Freedom Convoy. There are many disagreements regarding this. One of them, as you pointed out, Trooper, is the estimated size of the convoy overall. Now, make no mistake, obviously, not everybody in these protests are truckers. Also, there are a lot of concerns from people in Ottawa and from people abroad that this has echoes of the January 6th attack on the Capitol of the United States. And you can see why people would draw those parallels. We were talking off air about when to do an episode on this. And do we wait until more of the accurate information is solidified, or do we go with what we have now, knowing that things will probably change as this is a fluid situation? We haven't recorded the episode yet, but we did have some great research help. I went to Twitter, Ben Bolin HSW, as I do sometimes, just to get a sense of what our fellow listeners are thinking. And all I asked, I was trying to be very neutral about this, Matt, Noel. All I asked was, Canadian/Canadian adjacent friends, what's your take on the trucker convoy protest Ottawa occupation? And from what we're hearing there from a lot of people in Canada, it seems like this is being regarded as a far right movement, or that's how it's being reported. What do you guys think about that?
The stuff that I've read, it's tough for me to know, Ben, I have to say, because of the reporting that I've read. It feels like things are being written about it in a negative light. I would say that at least from what I understand, it was very much rooted in personal freedom against some kind of mandate relating to the vaccine. That's my understanding of it. And it does feel like it was a thing that now has ballooned out that encompasses many other things. At least that's what I've gathered. Is that your sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because just for some quick numbers, it's important for us to establish that the majority of people working in the trucking industry in Canada are vaccinated, from what I can see, to the order of like 85%, 85 to 90%. You'll see. I think 85 is a little more believable number. So it is not as though the majority of the industry is powering this thing. A lot of non-truckers, as you mentioned at the top, have joined the protest for a number of reasons. There's always going to be mission creep whenever you get that many people together on a grassroots basis. Like if you look at the Occupy protests several years ago here in the US, they had the people in those protests had a growing number of goals, some of which were contradictory if you just looked at them on paper. So these protests make strange bedfellows, because what we're looking at is a Venn diagram, right, of different groups who may not agree with each other on everything else, but they're saying they don't want a vaccine mandate. They're getting heat in the news for being violent toward, I believe, homeless populations and things of that nature. But because this is an ongoing situation, even the best reporting is still going to suffer from a bit of a fog of war, because we're getting these conflicting statements, these conflicting agendas. It does remind us, though, of something we predicted a number of years back, I think. And Matt, you brought this up off air. I can't remember when we said it. Okay, everybody get your shots ready. I can't remember if we talked about this on air or while we were hanging out one night, but we got to the conversation about, we did. Okay. Well, everybody spit the shot back into the glass. So we, kidding. But so one of the points that we made was the importance of the trucking and shipping industries, right? You might not live in the world of trucking, you might not think it affects you, but if those groups ever decided to go on a nationwide strike, whatever country they are in would shut down. There's just no way around it.
I mean, it sounds like even just physically pulling all their heavy duty trucks into one place is just causing pandemonium in and of itself, right?
Yeah. People have been leaving Ottawa. Yeah.
They are large physical barriers that are mobile. Could be a problem.
You get a coordinated effort and you could probably encircle a whole city with those things.
Well, I mean, if you look at some of the photography coming out of the protests, it's astounding. Looking at downtown streets that are just filled with big rig trucks and no other traffic can get around. And I mean, it's effectively occupying large areas and shutting down commerce and just traffic in general.
Yeah, and there are also criticisms being leveled at law enforcement. They're saying, you'll see reports of arguments saying the police were much less likely to suppress or break up these protesters than they would, say, Black Lives Matter protest, right? So there are accusations of bias on the side of law enforcement. And then that argument is being met with a counter argument on the part of law enforcement. It's true that this is happening. There are a ton of people in Ottawa right now, and they are protesting. Ultimately, at the very beginning, they're protesting the vaccine mandate in that country. However, as mission creep has crept, what we're seeing is increasing demands or increasing declarations, including some factions who are saying, let's overthrow the federal government. That's where the comparison to January 6th comes in. And for anyone who's ever dealt with the government, none of them are perfect. Nobody has gotten it right yet over the course of thousands of years. No one has made a perfect government and probably won't for a while, but it's still better than nothing. That's the problem. Like a lot of times, and this is just my perspective, but a lot of times when I hear people arguing for a world in which a federal government doesn't exist, or a country rather, they've never been to a failed state. They do not know what it's like to live in a place that does not have a government. It is ugly. It is dangerous. It is messy. And, I think for a lot of people, if you ever experience that, you're going to be much less irritated about the warts and the imperfections of your own government. With that being said, vaccine mandates, that's a whole other thing. We've had a lot of our fellow listeners write in some calling for more comprehensive mandates, and some people saying that it's, impinging upon their natural liberties. At this point, we're always very careful to be clear when we're talking about our own opinions rather than speculation or fact. But I was recently in a place that was requiring proof of vaccination to go to restaurants or to go to venues. And I loved it. Just because I like feeling like I'm somehow going through customs. You know what I mean? And that's just me. I don't have any science there. I just like when people ask me for a form and I have the form, I feel like I won. You know what I mean? I need a win.
Is it really worth it for all the waiting though? Just for that one moment?
I don't know, man. It's like there's something about it. There's something about the bureaucracy.
No, you're right. It is satisfying once you get to pass through, but everything leading up to that, to me, is pure anxiety. Because right. I always feel as though I've done something wrong, even though I definitely haven't. I assume that there's something that's going to go wrong, that my papers will not be in order, that I will have secretly stowed away with a kilo of cocaine that I'm unaware of, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like whenever
there's laughter, take a drink. Take a drink.
Whenever I hear a siren on the road anywhere, just for a second, I'm like convinced I'm running guns, and I just forgot about it. But then someone the anxiety is real. We're putting in some levity here because we know this is a very sensitive subject for a lot of people. And we endeavor to approach these things grounded in the world of fact and see if we can cut past the noise. Is there media bias in the reporting on these, on this convoy, on this occupation of Ottawa? Well, I mean, there's going to be some sort of bias, inevitably, because up to now, the journalists working on any story are going to be human beings, and human beings are inherently biased creatures. It's kind of an abstract point to make, though. It does remain an important one. If you read accounts of this in, say, Fox News, you're going to get a different slant than you would in, say, New York Times or Al Jazeera. And I was reading a lot of New York Times reporting on this, which I thought was excellent. You know what I mean? But for many people, a source like the New York Times is going to be considered worthless because they think it's already too left-leaning. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just wanted to call back to something that our caller Canadian Trooper mentioned, just to the, it seems like it's some bad apples, but maybe it's more than that. And it reminds me of some of the Al Jazeera reporting where I'll just read a quote, some protesters were seen waving Confederate or Nazi flags and insist the action will continue until COVID-related restrictions are lifted. A statement like that, some protesters were waving Confederate or Nazi flags, can't represent everybody, right? That's in that thing, but it is not a good look and it's not a great thing. It's just how many is some, was it a couple of vans in the back, or was it a couple of the main trucks at the front of the lines? That would make a big difference. It's just that, and I'm not saying anything against the reporter, it's not a false statement. Some protesters were seen doing that. It's just, it paints a picture in your mind as the reader of what this thing is about, maybe, right?
How many are some? Yeah. How much is a heap, right? These are tricky measurements. Yes.
Also, what does right wing in Canada mean the same thing as it means over here?
Yeah, generally.
Ideologically speaking.
I mean, one of the main differences is you could say there's more of a prominent left-wing tendency in part of Canadian politics, like for a European or an international audience, I don't want to ruffle feathers. These are just the facts. The average European or the average international audience, if they look at someone like current President Biden, they're not going to think of that guy as left-wing. They're going to think of him as a center-right politician,
right?
Which, by his actions, that's what his administration is.
And the right-wing party is called the People's Party of Canada. And in the Senate the Canadian Senate, there are 0 of 105 members that represent this party, just to back up what you said.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. So this, and also Canadian, the political apparatus is a little bit different from the U.S. You can read about it in depth. Just be prepared to, bring some coffee with you when you start reading about it, because it's not a page turner. So I'm trying to be diplomatic, but this is where we're at now, and it kind of goes into media responsibility, or your responsibility as a reader or a consumer of media. Yes, your brain is hardwired to tell you everything is awesome when you're reading stuff that confirms your existing opinion. As part of that little quirk is part of why humanity has been so popular so recently on the planet. It just works for people. But you have to fight against that, right? If you think you are very, very far right, or you think you're very, very far left, and you want to read or to learn more about a world event, you need to read the sources you don't like. You have to find a way to triangulate toward the truth. And it's work. It doesn't feel great because your brain is going to be like, what's this information? This is not what we discussed earlier, and
it makes my brain hurt. I said a sentence earlier in this episode where I was like questioning whether or not reporting about, right extremists were being marginalized in this reporting. Like, that's insane. That hurts my head. But you have to use your mind.
It's almost as though political correctness even extends toward like being more friendly to fascists. It
sucks.
You know what I mean?
Well, that's why that's part of the work that you have to do. You can't read one thing and then take that as an article of faith. You know what I mean? You do have to. I always remember one of my favorite memes is just a photograph of graffiti, and it says in big letters, "Question everything." And then somebody came by later and wrote, "Why?" And that's the mentality you kind of have to take with you. So just to sew this up, because we're probably going to dive into this more in the future, I'd like to read some of the responses that I got on Twitter. And thank you to everybody who wrote in. Earlier we said, looking to learn more context. We tried to phrase that question very neutrally, so it didn't seem like we were priming people to respond a certain way. And Matt, Noel, and Mission Control and I do not live in Canada. Right. We have not lived in Ottawa. So we needed reports from people on the ground. So Heather, longtime listener, Fracky Fire, you guys remember Heather, said that she's furious and worried and embarrassed on behalf of Canada. She says the convoy is run by the far right. It's part grift. It's part tantrum by, quote, giant babies who think putting on a mask is worse than killing people. Police response is in sharp contrast to what they do when First Nations people protest, the Indigenous communities in Canada. We had that echoed by several other people who were saying this was organized by far-right members. If you want to read more detail, you can go to my conversation there on Twitter. People have posted some pretty compelling sources, especially in relationship to folks who were leaders of the protest movement and of the convoy. We saw some folks saying it's their right to protest. We also had some firsthand reports of family members being physically assaulted by people in Ottawa. Again, that's, like you pointed out, Canadian trooper, that might be a few bad apples thing, but we don't know where the line is on that because there's not a source that's saying, X percentage of these people were neo-Nazis or anything. They're saying some. They're saying I saw some stuff. I think we can all agree it's not a good look to have Nazis co-signing anything you're doing. I don't think that's a hot take. I hope not. So this protest has been going on for 11 days and it doesn't show signs of stopping. I know this can be very sensitive. Nobody is super excited about a pandemic continuing. And in many cases, it seems like people have just in their minds emotionally had enough of lockdowns, of its effect on the economy and business and so on. But
I get that.
Yeah, I get that. It's a very touchy subject though. And so our main takeaway for now, until we do a deep dive episode on this, is the following. We have a responsibility as consumers of media to try our best to get the entire picture. And a big part of getting an entire picture of anything is to know what you're disagreeing with. That's why often atheists are pretty sharp on the Bible. You know what I mean? I respect atheists who have read the religious works that they disagree with. I think that's due diligence. And we have to do our due diligence here. Currently, Ottawa is in a state of emergency. The police are saying they're overwhelmed. We're going to see how the situation develops. So we're going to wrap the show for today, but we want to hear from you. If you want to take a page from your fellow conspiracy realist book, we have any number of ways to contact us. Would especially love to hear from people in Canada, from people specifically in Ottawa. What is your take on the ongoing occupation? We try to be easy to find online.
Oh, we sure do. You can find us on the internet. We are on Facebook. We are on Twitter. We are on YouTube under the handle @ConspiracyStuff. You can find us on Instagram @ConspiracyStuffShow. Matt, if they don't want to do that, they don't even want to go on the internet. Stay away from it. It's a viper's nest of toxic behavior, they say. What can they do as an alternative?
You can reach us via the phone number 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, please give yourself a wonderful nickname. Bonus points if you can make us laugh with that nickname. You've got 3 minutes. Say whatever you wish. Please include in that 3 minutes permission to use your voice and or message altogether on the air. If you do give us that permission. If not, let us know up top. Hey, don't use this. It's that easy. If you've got more to say than can fit into 3 minutes of a voice message, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.